2 years, 7 months, and 12 days. Alara had counted them all. Each one was a small, smooth stone she carried in her pocket, a secret weight that was hers alone. It was the precise length of time she had been in love with Chloe, a fact as elemental to her as the marrow in her bones and just as hidden from view. The love was a quiet, chronic ache, a background hum beneath the noise of their shared lives. It was the ghost in the machine of their friendship, the silent third roommate in their sun-drenched two-bedroom apartment. Today, the ache was a sharp, insistent throb. It always was when Mark was the topic of conversation. Chloe was pacing the length of their living room, a whirlwind of restless energy contained by the four walls. The afternoon light caught the gold threads in her hair, turning her into a frantic, beautiful storm Alara could only watch from the safety of the worn floral armchair. She was a fixed point, an anchor, while Chloe was the tempest. It had always been this way. "I just don't understand it," Chloe said, her voice tight with a frustration that felt thin, like a sheet of ice stretched over a deep, dark lake. She threw her hands up, the gesture sharp and sudden. "We're supposed to be happy. We have the anniversary dinner, the weekend trips, the couple photos. We check all the boxes, Alara. Why doesn't it feel like anything?" Alara's heart did a familiar, painful twist. A knife turning in an old wound. She had to swallow before she could speak, forcing her voice to be the soothing balm Chloe needed it to be. "What do you mean, like anything?" she asked, her tone gentle, practiced. She was an expert at this particular brand of self-torture, being the calm, rational-sounding board for the woman she loved as she dissected a relationship that was slowly killing Alara from the inside out. "Like it's real," Chloe sighed, finally collapsing onto the couch opposite Alara. She tucked her feet under her body curling inward as if to protect a fragile core. "It feels like we're playing house. Like I'm an actress in a play about a happy couple, and I know all my lines, and I hit all my marks, but I go home at the end of the night and I don't feel a thing. Do you know what I mean?" Alara knew exactly what she meant. She felt it every day. Her life was a performance of platonic friendship, a role she had perfected over 2 years, 7 months, and 12 days. She nodded slowly, the motion feeling heavy, deliberate. "I think so, he's a good guy," Chloe continued, her gaze fixed on a loose thread on the sofa cushion, her fingers worrying it. "Mark is kind, he's handsome, my parents love him. He's perfect. On paper. But when he touches me," she shuddered, a small, almost imperceptible tremor that Alara felt like a seismic event. "It's like my skin goes numb. It's a hand on my arm, and I know it's supposed to feel comforting or exciting or something. But it's just pressure. It's just warmth. There's no spark. No electricity." Alara knew all about electricity. She felt it every time Chloe's hand accidentally brushed against hers when they reached for the same coffee mug in the morning. A jolt, sharp and clean and terrifying, that shot up her arm and straight to her heart. She felt it now, a low-voltage current humming in the air between them, charged with everything she could not say. "Maybe you're just in a rut," Alara offered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. It was the safe answer, the friend answer. It was a lie. Chloe looked up then, her hazel eyes, flecked with green and gold, meeting Alara's. There was a raw vulnerability in them that made Alara's breath catch. "Or maybe," Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible, "this isn't what it's supposed to feel like at all." The statement hung in the air, a fragile, shimmering thing. It was the closest Chloe had ever come to admitting the fundamental flaw in her picture-perfect life. For a wild, stupid moment, hope flared in Alara's chest, a treacherous little bird taking flight. She wanted to say, "No, it isn't. It's supposed to feel like this, like the way I feel when I look at you. It's supposed to feel like you're the only person in the world." But she didn't. She couldn't. The risk was too great. Losing Chloe's friendship would be like losing a limb, like learning to breathe underwater. It was an impossible, unthinkable prospect. So she just held her friend's gaze and gave a small, non-committal shrug, a gesture that cost her everything. The moment passed. Chloe sighed again, the tension seeping out of her shoulders. She ran a hand through her hair. "You're probably right. It's just a rut. I'm just overthinking everything, as usual. She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thanks for listening, Elle. You're always so good at talking me down anytime, Alara murmured, the word a betrayal of her own heart. The conversation ended there, as it always did. Chloe would patch things up with Mark, and the cycle would continue. Alara would go back to being the supportive friend, the keeper of secrets, the silent lover. She watched as Chloe stood up and stretched, the afternoon sun creating a halo around her. She was beautiful. So achingly, impossibly beautiful. And for Alara, she was a religion she had to practice in silence, a prayer she could never speak aloud. The weight of the stones in her pocket felt heavier than ever. That night, the silence in the apartment was different. It was heavier, laced with the residue of Chloe's earlier confession. Alara lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in her mind. Why doesn't it feel like anything? The question echoed in the dark. Alara knew what it felt like. For her, loving Chloe was everything. It was the terror of standing on a cliff edge and the safety of a harbor all at once. It was the warmth of the sun on her skin and the cold dread of a coming storm. It was a symphony of feelings so loud and overwhelming that she was constantly amazed Chloe couldn't hear it. She traced patterns on her comforter, imagining it was Chloe's skin. The thought sent a forbidden thrill through her, followed by a wave of shame. This was her secret world, lived out in the lonely hours after midnight. A world where she could admit the truth, where the electricity wasn't just an accident, but an invitation. She wondered what Chloe was doing in the room next door. Was she texting Mark, smoothing over the cracks in their relationship with carefully chosen words and heart emojis? Or was she, too, lying awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering why everything felt so wrong? Alara wanted to believe it was the latter. She wanted to believe that the crack Chloe had revealed today was too big to be papered over. But hope was a dangerous thing. It had burned her before. She remembered the early days, right after she had realized the true nature of her feelings. Every shared laugh, every lingering glance from Chloe had been a sign, a breadcrumb leading her down a path of what-ifs. She had been so sure, for a fleeting, glorious month, that the feeling was mutual. And then Chloe had met Mark. The day Chloe had introduced them, a smiling, handsome man with kind eyes, had been the day Alara learned to build walls around her heart. She had smiled, shaken his hand, and felt a piece of herself crumble into dust. From that day on, she had become the friend. The best friend. The permanent fixture in Chloe's life who was safe, reliable, and utterly, completely platonic. A soft knock on her door shattered her reverie. Alara's heart leaped into her throat. Elle? Chloe's voice was small, muffled by the wood. Are you awake? Alara sat up, her pulse racing. Yeah. Come in. The door creaked open, and Chloe slipped inside, a silhouette against the faint light from the hallway. She was holding her pillow, her favorite one with the worn, faded blue case. She looked small and lost. I couldn't sleep, she whispered, padding over to the bed. My brain won't shut off, Mark again. Alara asked, her voice softer than she intended. Chloe shook her head, though the gesture was barely visible in the gloom. Everything. Mark. Me. What you said, about it being a rut. What if it's not? What if it's just a dead end? She hugged the pillow to her chest like a shield. This is going to sound weird, but can I stay in here tonight? Your room always feels calmer than mine, the world tilted on its axis. Alara's mind went blank, all thought replaced by a roaring static. Chloe in her bed. It was a fantasy she had entertained 1,000 times in the dead of night, a secret, impossible dream. And now it was happening. It was not for the reasons she had dreamed of, but it was happening nonetheless. Her silence stretched for a moment too long. It's stupid, I'm sorry, Chloe said quickly, already backing away. Forget I said anything. I'll just go. No, Alara said, the word coming out louder than she expected. She cleared her throat. No, it's not stupid. Of course, you can. She shifted over, creating a space on the other side of the queen-sized mattress. It felt like a chasm, a vast and terrifying distance. Come on, Chloe hesitated for another second before climbing in, her movements careful, tentative, as if she were handling something precious that might break. She settled under the covers, lying on her back, her pillow clutched to her chest. The scent of her shampoo, vanilla, and something floral filled the air, and Alara felt dizzy with it. She was so close. Too close. They lay in silence for a long time, two bodies in the dark, separated by a few inches of mattress that felt like a mile-wide canyon. Alara could feel the heat radiating from Chloe's body. She focused on her own breathing, trying to make it slow and even, terrified that Chloe would hear the frantic, panicked drumming of her heart. "Thank you," Chloe whispered finally, her voice thick with emotion. "It's okay," Alara whispered back. Another silence fell. Alara thought Chloe might have fallen asleep, but then she spoke again, her voice so quiet it was almost a thought. "Does it ever scare you?" Alara turned her head on her pillow to look at Chloe's silhouette. "Does what scare me? That you'll wake up one day and realize you've been living the wrong life? That you made all the wrong choices and it's too late to go back." The question was a direct hit, a perfectly aimed arrow into the most vulnerable part of Alara's soul. She thought about her choices. The choice to stay silent. The choice to be the friend. The choice to watch the love of her life build a life with someone else. Every day, Alara admitted, the truth slipping out before she could stop it. The confession was veiled, but it was the most honest thing she had said to Chloe in years. She felt more than saw Chloe turn to face her. "Really?" Really, in the darkness, a hand moved across the space between them. Fingers, hesitant and warm, brushed against the back of Alara's hand. The contact was electric. A firework display erupted under Alara's skin. It was not an accident. It was not a casual brush. Chloe's fingers gently, purposefully, intertwined with hers. Alara's breath hitched. Her entire universe narrowed to that single point of contact. Chloe's hand holding hers in the dark. "I feel less scared right now," Chloe murmured, her thumb stroking the back of Alara's hand. "With you here," and Alara knew, with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty, that something had just irrevocably shifted between them. A line had been crossed in the dark. The catalyst had been ignited. The world she had known for 2 years, 7 months, and 12 days was beginning to fracture, and she had no idea what would be left when it broke apart, only that she was holding Chloe's hand as it happened. The next morning broke with a fragile, unspoken newness. Alara woke first, the pale gray light of dawn filtering through her window. For a disoriented moment, she forgot, and then she felt it, the warm, solid weight of Chloe's hand still laced with hers. Chloe was asleep, her breathing deep and even, her face turned towards Alara. In the soft light, she looked younger, the lines of worry and frustration smoothed away. Her lips were slightly parted, and a stray strand of golden hair had fallen across her cheek. Alara's heart ached with a tenderness so profound it felt like a physical pain. She lay perfectly still, terrified of waking Chloe, of breaking the spell. This was a dangerous, precious gift. To be able to watch her like this, unguarded and peaceful, to feel the steady beat of her pulse through their joined hands. It was more intimacy than she had allowed herself to even dream of. She committed every detail to memory, the faint dusting of freckles across Chloe's nose, the way her eyelashes fanned out against her skin, the gentle rise and fall of her chest. Eventually, Chloe stirred, her eyelids fluttering. She blinked a few times, her gaze unfocused, and then her eyes found Alara's. A moment of pure, unadulterated connection passed between them, a silent conversation in the morning quiet. Chloe's eyes widened slightly as she seemed to realize their hands were still intertwined. A faint blush crept up her neck. But she didn't pull away. "Morning," Chloe rasped, her voice husky with sleep. "Morning," Alara replied, her own voice barely a whisper. Chloe's thumb stroked her hand again, a slow, deliberate movement. "I slept," she said, a note of wonder in her tone. "The whole night." "I can't remember the last time I did that. I'm glad," Alara said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. The spell was broken by the harsh reality of the outside world, Chloe's phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. They both flinched. Chloe's gaze flickered towards the screen, and the soft, open expression on her face shuddered, replaced by a familiar tension. She gently withdrew her hand from Alara's, and the loss of contact was a physical blow, leaving Alara's skin feeling cold and empty. It was Mark. Of course, it was Mark. A string of texts, followed by a call. The breakup happened over the phone, a quiet, anticlimactic end to a relationship that had always felt more theoretical than real. Alara stayed in her room, giving Chloe privacy, but she could hear the muffled sounds through the wall. Chloe's voice was low and steady, without the anger or tears Alara might have expected. It was calm, resolute. Final. When Chloe emerged from her room an hour later, she looked lighter. The storm had passed, and in its wake was a strange and unfamiliar calm. She walked into the kitchen where Alara was nursing a cup of coffee, her nerves frayed. "It's over," Chloe said simply. She leaned against the counter, not looking at Alara, but staring out the window at the bustling street below. "Are you okay?" Alara asked, the question feeling woefully inadequate. Chloe was silent for a long moment. "I think I am," she said, sounding surprised by her own words. "I feel sad that I hurt him. But mostly, I feel relieved. Like I can finally breathe." She finally turned to look at Alara, a small, uncertain smile playing on her lips. "Is that awful?" "No," Alara said immediately. "It's not awful. It's honest." That honesty became the foundation of the weeks that followed. The apartment, once a space of careful boundaries and unspoken truths, transformed into a sanctuary. They fell into a new rhythm, one defined by late-night talks on the couch, mugs of tea steaming between their hands. The conversations were different now. They were no longer about Mark. They were about everything. One night, wrapped in blankets against the evening chill, Chloe turned to her, her expression serious. "What do you think real love feels like?" she asked. The question dropped into the quiet room like a stone into a still pond. Alara's heart stuttered. This was a minefield. She had to tread carefully. "I don't know," she began, choosing her words with painstaking precision. "I guess it feels safe. Like you can be your complete, messy, unapologetic self and know that you won't be judged. And it's quiet. It's not about the grand gestures, but the small, everyday moments. The comfort in just being in the same room with someone." She was describing them. She was describing this, the quiet intimacy of their life together, and the realization made her voice catch. Chloe was watching her, her gaze intense. "Quiet," she repeated softly. "I like that. Everything with Mark felt so loud. Performative. Like we were constantly trying to prove to everyone, including ourselves, how happy we were." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I think I've been playing a role for so long I've forgotten who I am without the script." The physical space between them began to shrink. It happened so gradually Alara almost didn't notice it, until one day she realized it was their new normal. When they watched movies on the couch, they no longer sat at opposite ends. Chloe would tuck her feet up, her legs resting against Alara's, the contact easy and natural. Hugs, once a quick, friendly affair, now lingered. Chloe would wrap her arms around Alara and hold on for a few extra seconds, resting her head on Alara's shoulder, and Alara would have to remind herself to breathe. Touch became their new language. A hand on the small of Alara's back as they passed in the narrow hallway. Fingers brushing as they reached for the salt. Chloe tucking a stray strand of hair behind Alara's ear, her touch featherlight and lingering, sending a cascade of sparks down Alara's spine. Each touch was a question, and Alara was terrified to answer, terrified to hope for what it might mean. She started catching Chloe looking at her in a new way. It was a softness in her eyes, a sort of wondering vulnerability that hadn't been there before. Sometimes, in the middle of a conversation, Alara would see Chloe's gaze drop to her lips for a fraction of a second. The first time it happened, Alara had convinced herself she'd imagined it. The second time, a flicker of something wild and hopeful ignited in her chest. The third time, her own breath hitched, and she had to look away, her heart hammering against her ribs. This escalation was a slow, beautiful torture. It was everything she had ever wanted, unfolding before her eyes, and yet she was paralyzed by the fear that she was misreading it all. What if this was just Chloe, reeling from her breakup, clinging to the closest, safest person she knew? What if Alara was just a rest stop on the way to Chloe's next relationship with another man? The thought was a shard of ice in her heart. The potential for devastation was monumental. To have this fragile, budding intimacy, only to have it snatched away, would be a pain she wasn't sure she could survive. So she held back. She reciprocated the touches, but never initiated them. She answered Chloe's deep, searching questions, but never asked her own. She was a mirror, reflecting Chloe's tentative exploration, too afraid to reveal the depths of her own long-held feelings. She existed in a state of suspended animation, caught between the heaven of what could be and the hell of what might happen if she was wrong. One rainy Saturday afternoon, they were curled up on the couch, reading. The only sounds were the soft rustle of turning pages and the drumming of rain against the windowpane. It was a perfect, peaceful domesticity that felt so much like a relationship that it made Alara's chest ache. "Elle?" Chloe said, her voice soft, not looking up from her book. Have you ever thought about, I don't know, kissing a girl?" Alara's book slipped from her fingers, falling to the floor with a soft thud. The air crackled. The quiet room was suddenly charged with an unbearable tension. The question was so direct, so out of the blue, yet it felt like the only question that had ever mattered. She bent to pick up her book, stalling, her mind racing. An honest answer would be a confession. "I think about kissing one particular girl every second of every day." A dishonest answer would be another betrayal of herself. She sat back up, clutching the book to her chest like a shield. I guess I've been more focused on the person than the gender," she said, the words careful, diplomatic. It was true, but it was also a masterful evasion. Chloe finally looked up from her book, her hazel eyes searching Alara's face. "Me too," she said quietly. Lately, anyway, the admission hung between them, as tangible as the rain streaming down the glass. Lately. The word was a key, unlocking a door Alara had been too afraid to even touch. Chloe was not just exploring a hypothetical. She was talking about now. She was talking about them. Alara's carefully constructed walls of self-preservation began to crumble. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but for the first time, it was overshadowed by a desperate, soaring hope. She saw it then, in the way Chloe was looking at her, not just with the affection of a friend, but with a dawning sense of wonder and discovery. It was the look of someone seeing a familiar landscape for the first time in a new light, realizing its hidden beauty. And in that moment, Alara knew that the quiet life she had built for herself was over. The performance was ending. The current was pulling her forward, and she was no longer fighting it. She was being swept towards something terrifying and beautiful, and all she could do was let go. The unspoken tension, once a gentle hum, had amplified into a high-pitched, vibrating frequency that resonated in every corner of their apartment. It was in the silences that stretched too long, the eye contact that held for a second more than it should, the careful way they navigated the small space around each other, as if their bodies were magnets with shifting polarities. Alara felt like she was living on a knife's edge, every nerve ending exposed and tingling. She was so attuned to Chloe that she could feel the subtle shifts in her mood, the questions brewing behind her eyes. And then, Alara panicked. The sheer magnitude of what was happening, of what could happen, became too much. The hope was too bright, too blinding, and the fear of it being extinguished was a monstrous shadow that loomed over her. What if she was wrong? What if she destroyed the most important relationship in her life over a feeling that was all in her head? The thought sent a cold dread seeping through her veins. So she did the only thing she could think of to protect herself. She began to pull away. It was subtle at first. She made sure she was the first one out of the apartment in the morning, avoiding their shared coffee ritual. She feigned exhaustion in the evenings, retreating to her room with her laptop instead of settling onto the couch for their now customary late-night talks. She answered Chloe's texts with one-word replies. She created a buffer of a few extra inches between them when they were in the same room. Each act of retreat was a small betrayal, a tiny cut against her own heart, but it felt necessary. A strategic withdrawal from a battle she was terrified she was about to lose. She told herself it was for the best. She was giving Chloe space, letting this, whatever it was, fizzle out on its own. She was protecting their friendship. But she felt like a ghost in her own home, haunting the periphery of a life that had, for a few brilliant weeks, felt so vividly real. The apartment grew quiet again, but it was not the comfortable silence of before. It was a hollow, aching void filled with everything they were not saying. It took 3 days. 3 days of this strained, painful dance before Chloe finally cornered her. Ilara had just gotten home from work, her key still in the lock, when Chloe appeared in the hallway, blocking her path. Her arms were crossed over her chest, and her expression was a mixture of hurt and steely resolve. The lightness of the past few weeks had vanished, replaced by the storm clouds Ilara had been so desperate to avoid. "We need to talk," Chloe said, her voice low and firm. There was no room for argument. Ilara's shoulders slumped in defeat. She closed the door behind her, the soft click echoing like a gunshot in the silent apartment. Okay, Chloe led the way to the living room, to the couch that had become their confessional. But instead of sitting, she remained standing, pacing in front of the coffee table. The restless energy was back, but this time it was focused, directed entirely at Ilara. "You've been avoiding me," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, an accusation. Ilara sank into the armchair, feeling small and exposed. "I've just been busy. Work has been crazy." The lie was flimsy, pathetic, and they both knew it. Chloe stopped pacing and spun to face her, her eyes flashing. Don't lie to me, Ilara. Not after everything. You've been hiding from me for 3 days, and I want to know why." Her voice cracked on the last word, and the sound of it broke Ilara's heart. She was hurting her. In her clumsy attempt to protect herself, she was causing the one person she never wanted to hurt unimaginable pain. "Chloe, Ilara started, but the words wouldn't come. What could she say? "I'm pulling away because I'm so desperately in love with you that the hope of you feeling the same is literally going to kill me." "Is it me?" Chloe asked, her voice dropping to a whisper, her anger deflating into a raw, painful vulnerability. "Did I do something? Did I cross a line? Was I reading everything wrong?" Each question was another turn of the knife. Ilara shook her head, a mute, miserable gesture. Chloe took a step closer, her hands falling to her sides. "Then what is it?" "Because something shifted between us." "I know it did. I felt it. And it was good. It was the first thing that's felt real and right in, maybe ever. And just as I was starting to understand it, you disappeared." Tears welled in her eyes, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. "So you have to tell me what's going on. What aren't you telling me?" The direct question. The point of no return. Ilara looked up at Chloe, at her beautiful, tear-streaked face, and knew the performance was over. The silence had become a poison, and the only antidote was the truth, no matter how terrifying. But before Ilara could find the words, Chloe started talking again, the thoughts seeming to pour out of her in a rush, as if she could no longer contain them. "After Mark and I broke up," she began, her gaze drifting towards the window, "I started thinking about everything, about all my relationships. And I realized they all had one thing in common. Me. I was the one who was never fully there. I was always holding a part of myself back, playing the part of the perfect girlfriend, because I thought that's what I was supposed to do." She looked back at Ilara, her eyes filled with a dawning, world-altering realization. "And then I looked at us. At you. And with you. I've never had to play a part. I've always just been me. And you've always just been you. It's the easiest, most natural thing in my life." She took another step, closing the distance between them until she was standing right in front of Ilara's chair. She knelt down, so their eyes were level. The scent of vanilla and rain filled Ilara's senses. "I think," Chloe's voice was trembling now, thick with unshed tears and a terrifying new conviction. "I think I might not be as straight as I thought I was, Elle. Maybe I've been looking for love in all the wrong places, with all the wrong people." Ilara's world stopped spinning. It was happening. It was all happening. The words she had dreamed of, the confession she never thought she'd hear. Chloe was all she could manage to breathe. And I've been thinking about what you said, Chloe continued, her voice dropping even lower, becoming a conspiratorial, intimate whisper. About kissing a girl. And the truth is, I haven't just been thinking about it in some vague, hypothetical way. Her gaze, impossibly, dropped to Alara's lips, and this time it lingered. It was not a fleeting glance. It was a clear, unmistakable statement of intent. She looked back up, her hazel eyes locking with Alara's. I've been thinking about kissing you, the pre-confession. The final, terrifying, beautiful step before the precipice. Chloe had laid her heart bare, her confusion and her dawning desire spread out for Alara to see. She had taken the biggest risk of her life, and now she was waiting. Waiting for Alara to meet her there, at the edge of everything they had ever been, and take the leap with her. Alara felt the last of her fear fall away, burned off by the sheer, brilliant heat of Chloe's honesty. There was no more hiding. There was only this moment, this truth, this woman kneeling before her, offering her a world she had only ever allowed herself to visit in dreams. The confession hung in the air between them, a fragile, shimmering bridge that Chloe had built out of her own vulnerability. I've been thinking about kissing you. The words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the room. They replayed in Alara's mind, a melody she had waited her entire life to hear. All the air had been sucked from her lungs, replaced by a dizzying, effervescent hope. Chloe was still kneeling before her, her eyes wide and searching, her entire being braced for impact, for rejection, for anything. She had done her part. She had walked out onto the wire, and now it was Alara's turn to take a step. Alara finally found her voice, and when she spoke, it was a raw, broken whisper. Chloe, just her name. But it was filled with 2 years, 7 months, and 13 days of unspoken love. It was a prayer and a plea all at once. Tears finally spilled over and traced paths down Chloe's cheeks. Please say something, she whispered. Anything. Even if it's to tell me I've just ruined everything. You haven't ruined anything, Alara said, her voice gaining a strength she didn't know she possessed. She reached out, her hand trembling, and cupped Chloe's cheek. Her skin was soft, damp with tears. The contact was an explosion, a supernova of feeling. You could never ruin anything. Chloe leaned into her touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment, a shuddering breath escaping her lips. I'm so scared, Elle. Me too, Alara admitted. I'm terrified. Chloe's eyes opened again, locking with hers. But not because of this. Not because of you. She took a deep, shaky breath, as if steeling herself for one final, monumental truth. Alara, I think I'm falling in love with you, and there it was. The world shifted, settled, and clicked into place. Everything that had been confusing and chaotic suddenly made perfect, crystalline sense. The ache in Alara's chest bloomed into something warm and expansive, a feeling so immense she thought she might actually burst from the sheer joy of it. Now it was her turn. The truth, all of it. You think you're falling, Alara said, a small, watery smile touching her lips. Chloe, I fell a long time ago. I've been in love with you for 2 years, 7 months, and 13 days. Chloe's expression fractured, moving through shock, disbelief, and then a dawning, beautiful understanding that lit her face from within. What? She breathed. 2, all this time? While I was with Mark. All those nights I cried on your shoulder about him. The horror and regret in her voice were palpable. Alara nodded, her thumb gently stroking Chloe's cheek. All this time, oh, Chloe choked out, a fresh wave of tears falling. Why didn't you say anything? I was too scared to lose you, Alara whispered, the confession feeling like the shedding of a heavy skin. Our friendship was everything to me. I couldn't risk it. You almost lost me by not saying anything, Chloe said, her voice thick with emotion. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against Alara's. They stayed like that for a moment, breathing the same air, their worlds finally aligned. All that wasted time, it wasn't wasted, Alara murmured, closing her eyes, savoring the impossible closeness. It led us here. Chloe pulled back just enough to look at her, her gaze dropping once more to Alara's lips. The air was thick, charged, humming with the energy of 1,000 unspoken desires finally given voice. The world outside the two of them ceased to exist. There was only the sound of their breathing, the rain against the window, and the frantic, synchronous beating of their two hearts. "Alara," Chloe whispered, her voice a fragile thread of sound. "Can I kiss you?" The question. The permission. The final gate before a new world. Alara couldn't find words. She could only nod, a single, jerky movement that conveyed all the wanting, all the waiting, all the years of silent yearning. That was all the confirmation Chloe needed. She leaned in slowly, giving Alara every opportunity to pull away, to stop this. But Alara was rooted to the spot, her entire being straining towards this one moment. The first touch was impossibly soft. It was just a brush of lips, hesitant and questioning. It was full of discovery, of Chloe learning the shape of Alara's mouth, of Alara finally feeling the reality of a dream she had held for so long. It was tentative and chaste, and it was the most electrifying thing Alara had ever experienced. Then, a soft sound, a sigh of relief and recognition, escaped Chloe's lips against hers. The hesitation melted away, replaced by a certainty that flowed between them. The kiss deepened. Chloe's hand came up to tangle in the hair at the nape of Alara's neck, pulling her closer, while Alara's hands framed Chloe's face, holding her as if she were the most precious, fragile thing in the universe. It was not a kiss of frantic, desperate passion. It was a kiss of homecoming. It tasted of salt from their tears and the sweet, familiar scent of vanilla. It was a conversation without words, a story of years of unspoken feelings and weeks of dawning realization finally finding their conclusion. It was a slow, perfect unfolding, a release of all the tension, all the fear, all the waiting. It was quiet. It was safe. It was real. When they finally pulled apart, it was only for the necessity of air. They rested their foreheads together again, their chests rising and falling in unison, their breath mingling between them. Alara's eyes were closed, but she could feel Chloe's smile against her skin. "Oh," Chloe breathed out, the word full of wonder. "Wow," Alara opened her eyes. Chloe's were shining, brighter than she had ever seen them, the green and gold flecks like constellations in a newly formed galaxy. That felt, Chloe started, then trailed off, searching for the right word. "Right," Alara finished for her, her voice full of a conviction that settled deep in her bones. Chloe nodded, a wide, beautiful smile breaking across her face. "Yeah, that felt right." She leaned in and kissed her again, a quick, sweet, affirming press of her lips. A promise. A beginning. The first sentence of a new and better story. The aftermath of the kiss was like the quiet, surreal calm after a storm has passed. The world felt both brand new and exactly as it should have always been. They were still in the living room, Chloe now curled up beside Alara in the armchair that suddenly felt big enough for both of them, her head resting on Alara's shoulder, their fingers intertwined in Alara's lap. The rain had softened to a gentle patter against the windows, a soothing soundtrack for the new reality they were navigating. For a long time, they didn't speak. There was nothing that needed to be said. The silence was comfortable, filled with the low hum of shared relief and a quiet, shimmering joy. Alara rested her cheek against the top of Chloe's head, breathing in the scent of her hair. She felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, a feeling of coming home to a place she hadn't even known she was searching for. The weight of the secret stones she had carried for so long was gone, replaced by the warm, solid reality of Chloe's hand in hers. It was Chloe who finally broke the silence, her voice a soft murmur against Alara's collarbone. "I'm so scared." The admission didn't surprise Alara. It was the logical next step. The euphoria of the confession was the lightning flash. This was the rumble of thunder that followed, the acknowledgement of the vast, unknown landscape the storm had revealed. "I know," Alara said, her voice just as quiet. "Me too." She squeezed Chloe's hand. "What are you scared of?" Chloe shifted, lifting her head to look at Alara. Her eyes were serious, the initial joy tempered by a thoughtful apprehension. "Everything. What does this mean? What are we?" I've never I don't know how to do this. I feel like I just woke up from a long dream and I don't recognize anything. Alara met her gaze, offering her all the reassurance she could. Then we'll figure it out together. We don't have to have all the answers right now. We don't have to be anything except this, she gestured between the two of them. Honest, Chloe seemed to consider this, her brow furrowed in thought. Honest, she repeated. Okay, honestly then. I feel like I need to apologize to you. Alara was taken aback. Apologize? For what? For everything. For being so oblivious. For crying to you about Mark for months and months when you were feeling what you were feeling. That must have been torture for you. I'm so sorry, Elle. The regret in her voice was genuine and deep. Hey, Alara said softly, bringing her free hand up to cup Chloe's face. You have nothing to be sorry for. You didn't know. Anne, I was your friend. That's what friends do. I never wanted you to be unhappy, Chloe. Even when it hurt, all I ever wanted was for you to be happy. A single tear escaped Chloe's eye, and Alara gently wiped it away with her thumb. That's the thing, though, Chloe said, her voice thick. I don't think I ever was, not really. Not with him. I was just going through the motions. And I think I know why now. She took a deep breath, and Alara could see her connecting dots in her mind, recontextualizing her own past. I was always comparing him to you, she said, the realization dawning on her face. Not in a romantic way, I didn't think. But in every other way that mattered. I'd be on a date with him, and he'd say something, and I'd think Alara would have understood what I meant, or he'd try to comfort me when I was upset, and it would just feel clumsy. And I'd find myself wishing I was home, on the couch, talking to you. She let out a small, humorless laugh. I was measuring every relationship against what I had with you, and they all came up short. I just never understood what that meant. I thought it just meant we were really, really good best friends. The confession was a balm on wounds Alara hadn't even realized were still so raw. To know that on some subconscious level, she had always been the benchmark, the standard of true connection in Chloe's life, was a validation so profound it almost brought her to tears. We are really, really good best friends, Alara said, her voice choked with emotion. That's the foundation. That's why whatever this is going to be okay. Chloe nodded, a look of resolve settling over her features. Okay, she took another deep breath, like a swimmer preparing to dive into deep water. So, what do we do now? It was the question of the hour. The great unknown. Alara didn't have a map. She only had a compass, and it was pointing directly at the woman in her arms. How about this? Alara proposed gently. We take it one day at a time. No pressure. No labels unless we both want them. We just keep being honest. And we see where it takes us. A slow, beautiful smile spread across Chloe's face, a sunrise after a long night. One day at a time, she agreed. I can do that. I want to do that. She leaned in and rested her forehead against Alara's again. With you, with me, Alara echoed, the words a quiet, solid vow. They made a decision then, not with any grand pronouncement, but in the quiet understanding that passed between them. They would try. They would be brave enough to explore this new territory together. The fear was still there, a faint tremor beneath the surface, but it was no longer a paralyzing force. It was just a part of the journey now, a reminder of how much was at stake, of how precious this fragile, new beginning truly was. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. And for the first time, Alara realized she didn't want to. She was exactly where she needed to be. 3 months later, the world had settled into a new, beautiful rhythm. The apartment, once a stage for unspoken longing and quiet suffering, was now home in the truest sense of the word. It was filled with easy laughter, the scent of shared morning coffee, and a gentle, pervasive sense of peace. The tentative, questioning touches had been replaced by a confident, casual intimacy that was woven into the fabric of their daily lives. Alara woke up to the feeling of sunlight on her face and the warm weight of Chloe's arm draped across her waist. She smiled before she even opened her eyes. This was her new normal. Waking up in Chloe's arms, tangled together in the sheets of the bed that had once been a lonely island and was now their shared sanctuary. She turned carefully, not wanting to wake Chloe, and watched her sleep. The sight still filled her with a sense of profound wonder. The raw vulnerability of the night of the confession had softened into a peaceful, secure glow that seemed to radiate from Chloe even in her sleep. She looked happy. She looked whole. The first few weeks had been a navigation, a gentle dance of discovery. They learned each other in a new way. They learned the cadence of each other's breathing in the dark, the exact right way to hold hands, the quiet signals that meant, "I need a hug," or "I'm thinking of you." They talked for hours, unspooling their histories, their fears, their dreams, laying them all out until there were no secrets left between them. Chloe had told Mark. She had done it in person, a coffee meeting that she had been dreading for days. Ilara had waited at home, her stomach in knots, but Chloe had returned with that same look of relief she'd had after their breakup. He was sad, she had told Ilara, curling into her arms on the couch. But he was kind. He said he always kind of felt like he was competing with a ghost. I guess he was right, and that had been the end of that chapter. A quiet, respectful closing of a door to a life that no longer fit. Now, in the soft morning light, Chloe's eyelids fluttered open. Her hazel eyes, clear and bright, found Ilara's and she smiled, a slow, sleepy, contented smile that made Ilara's heart feel like it was expanding in her chest. "Morning," Chloe mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. She snuggled closer, burying her face in the crook of Ilara's neck. "You were staring, I'm allowed," Ilara whispered, pressing a soft kiss to Chloe's forehead. "It's my new favorite hobby," Chloe chuckled, the sound a warm vibration against Ilara's skin. "You're ridiculous, I'm happy," Ilara corrected her softly. They lay like that for a few more minutes, soaking in the quiet, perfect domesticity of the moment. It was a Saturday, with no plans other than to just be together. These were the moments Ilara cherished most, the small, unremarkable pockets of time that felt more significant than any grand gesture ever could. Eventually, the need for coffee propelled them out of bed. They moved around the kitchen in an easy, familiar choreography, bumping hips, stealing kisses over the steam of the kettle. Ilara was grinding beans while Chloe pulled their favorite mugs from the cupboard, the mismatched pair they'd bought at a flea market on one of their first real dates. Chloe leaned against the counter, watching Ilara with that soft, wondering look that still made Ilara's breath catch. "What?" Ilara asked, a smile playing on her lips. "Nothing," Chloe said, shaking her head slightly. "It's just this. Us. It feels so easy. So natural. Like my whole life was in black and white, and now everything is in color." The sentiment was so pure, so earnest, that it made Ilara's eyes well up. She set down the coffee grinder and walked over to Chloe, wrapping her arms around her waist and pulling her close. "I know exactly what you mean," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Chloe reached up and cupped Ilara's face, her thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. Her expression was serious now, full of a deep, abiding love that Ilara could see reflected in her own eyes. "Thank you," Chloe whispered. "For what?" Ilara asked, confused. "For waiting. For being patient. For not giving up on me, even when I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." Ilara leaned in, resting her forehead against Chloe's. "There was never any other option," she said simply. "It was always you." The kiss they shared was not like their first. It was not a kiss of discovery, but one of deep, settled knowledge. It was a kiss that spoke of shared jokes and wiped tears, of future plans and a past that had, against all odds, led them right here. It was a kiss that felt like coming home. Later that day, they found themselves back on the couch, a movie playing forgotten on the television. Ilara was lying with her head in Chloe's lap, Chloe's fingers gently tracing patterns on her arm. It was the same couch where so many tears had been shed, where so many charged conversations had taken place, where their entire world had been remade. Now it was simply a place of comfort, of safety. Ilara looked up at Chloe, at the way the afternoon light caught in her hair, at the soft, happy curve of her mouth as she watched the screen. All the years of quiet ache, of secret longing, had been worth it. Every single painful moment had been a stepping stone on the path that led to this lap, this touch, this love. She understood now that sometimes the most beautiful stories are not the ones that begin with a lightning bolt, but the ones that grow quietly, patiently, in the background, waiting for the right moment to finally bloom. She had found her home, not in a place, but in a person. And she knew, with a certainty that resonated in the very marrow of her bones, that she was exactly where she was always meant to be.